Hey everybody, it's Lo and welcome back to my channel, Lo Without Limits. In this video, I'm going to share with you 5 moves that you can do to grow your glutes. So if you want to see that, then just keep watching. Before jumping into the 5 exercises to grow your glutes, I just want to break down the muscles that make up our glutes. So it's actually 3 different muscles. The big one that covers most of our butt is the gluteus maximus. And this is a superficial muscle, meaning that it's on the outside. It's the one that is the biggest, so it can do the most work, take on the most load. And when that grows, that's really what you see when developing your booty. The second main muscle is the gluteus medius, and this is also a superficial muscle, again meaning that it's on the outside and is visible when you build it. And this one is a bit more on the side and also does help out with your hips a lot, and working both of these allows you to have that rounded look when growing your booty. The third muscle is the gluteus minimus, and this one is actually inside, so you can't see it, but it's super important for helping you with stability and with your hips and with rotation. And it works with the piriformis as well as a bunch of other smaller muscles inside in order to provide you with stability, with balance. So having those be strong as well is super important. So while those can be strengthened and those can help you and also can help you with longevity and making sure that you're moving properly, by building those isn't going to give you that booty look, but again, they are super important and do get worked when doing all of these exercises. These exercises also well target the hamstrings, which is the part on the back of your thighs, and that is also made up of 3 main muscles: the bicep femoris, which basically means thigh bicep, which when you think about your knee being the same as your elbow, pretty much makes sense. And the other 2 muscles that make up your hamstrings are the semitendinosus and semimembranosus. And all of those start at your pelvic bone and end at the back of your knee to create your hamstrings. And working together along with your back and your calves, all of that creates your posterior chain, which is super important just for daily life and moving, and strengthening that is really important since a lot of stuff that we do is ahead of us. We also want to make sure that our backside is strengthened too. Now for these 5 exercises, I'm also going to share some alternatives that you can do at home or with minimal equipment, or if you just don't want to go to the gym and lift a ton of weight, you don't feel comfortable with the barbell and you use a dumbbell or a kettlebell. So I will share some alternatives. That way everybody can do these moves. But what's important, no matter how you're doing it, is to make sure that you're progressively overloading. I have an entire video on progressive overload that I'll have linked down below if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of that. But essentially it's to make sure that you're doing more volume in terms of sets, reps, or load, or the weight that you're doing. That way you can progress and slowly build up muscle, build up strength, build up those muscle fibers. That way you can build the muscles that you want to develop. And another thing for these exercises before getting into them is that you don't have to do them all in a single workout. I actually recommend not doing them all in one workout, to break them up throughout the week and throughout your various workouts. That way you're not overworking one muscle group and tiring that out way too much. You want to be able to do enough to progressively overload, to challenge it, so that way it can grow those muscles without just fatiguing it and making it feel worse and then taking longer to recover, which then kind of takes a step back before you move forward. If you want a more in-depth video on workout programming based on the amount of days that you're going to the gym each week, let me know. I'm kind of thinking about making a video that breaks that down. That way you can easily program your own workouts. So if you're interested in that video, let me know in the comments and I will make that for you. And if you're interested in your own custom workout programming to you, your body, your schedule, your abilities, also let me know in the comments or reach out to me via email, and I would love to work with you as a personal trainer. Now finally getting into the 5 exercises to help you grow your glutes. The first one, of course, is the back squat. So the back squat is one of the best moves because it does work all of the muscles at once, and because you have the weight loaded above you, it's really helping you work your posterior chain. Now some alternatives that you can do for the back squat if you don't feel comfortable doing it with a barbell is by having either just body weight, getting a long resistance band that you can start with under your feet, holding up and then raising that, and then just increasing the resistance band as you begin to progressively overload, or even just increasing your reps, or by holding some light dumbbells and holding them up at your shoulder. That way it replicates a barbell back squat. When doing any back squat, whether you do it just a body weight or you are adding a loaded barbell, making sure that you have your feet either at shoulder distance or even a little bit wider than shoulder distance apart, either toes straight ahead or slightly pointed out. And that's based on personal preference, but that general stance of toes either forward or slightly out with your feet at around shoulder distance apart is great. And just making sure that your knees, when you are bending down, since you are bending at your ankles, knees, and hips simultaneously, that your knees are staying in line with about the center of your foot, your second and third toe. And doing that and having that will also make sure that you're working your glute med, because that will be pulling your legs and your knees back out instead of letting your knees cave in. And doing that is just not good form. You don't want to be doing that and then adding more weight on, because then you're just reinforcing poor form. So if you do feel like you do some weight and your knees are about to cave in, just back off the weight a little bit and then focus on that with the lighter weight in order to strengthen all of the muscles together to do the back squat. And when you are down, also focusing on depth. So if you're doing little squats, even if you put a ton of weight on the bar, but you're barely going down, you're not working your full muscle, you're not working the full range of motion, you're not getting the full benefit. Everybody thinks that at the top of the back squat is like the best part of the move, and they always squeeze their glutes. You don't need to squeeze your glutes at the top of your back squat, but it's actually at the bottom, when all that weight is down there, that your glutes are getting the most work and are getting the most strength. So the deeper you go safely, making sure that your ankles can do it without your toes lifting up and your knees aren't caving in, trying to go to at least parallel, which means that your butt becomes in line with your knees at the bottom, or below parallel to where your butt goes further down than your knees do at the bottom, is best. And working that full range of motion will just allow you to have a better range of motion for everything in life. It will mean that you're stronger from top all the way to as low as your butt can go, versus trying to just do a bunch of weight barely going down. Like, it doesn't really count. At least try to get to parallel, and if you can't get to parallel comfortably, then just doing body weight squats and working on mobility to make sure that your hips are healthy, your knees are healthy, your ankles are healthy. And if you are putting on a ton of weight but you're barely doing little squats, then when you try to go lower, it will actually be impossible. Focusing on getting nice depth, really feeling the movement, having that mind muscle connection to your glutes, and then once you're at the bottom, driving up through your heels all the way up to stand back up for your rep. And for your core, like I always say, just making sure that it's nice and braced, your trunk is nice and upright, you're not going to be hinging in your lower back or hunching forward, especially if you have weight on your upper back, because if you hunch forward with the weight, then it can roll forward, you topple forward. Hopefully you have safety bars set up, that way you don't injure yourself. So making sure that you're doing it properly and then progressively overloading in order to increase your strength. The second best exercise is the sumo squat. So for this one, now the back squats are really good at working your entire posterior chain, but the sumo squat is great because it really just focuses on your glutes. For this one, you will also have the weight ahead of you, just because that's a bit easier and allows you to have more depth. And for these ones, instead of with the regular squats where you're gonna have your feet about shoulder or wider, you're actually gonna have a bit of a wider stance, 6 or so inches wider on each side. And instead of your toes pointing either out or slightly out, you will have a more dramatic, like outward turn, maybe about like 30 to 45 degrees out. And again, keeping your knees tracking in line with the middle of your foot, that second, third toe, to work your glute med, because what that is doing is making sure that your knees are being pulled back. And by having that contraction at the bottom and at the top, with having your knees pulled back, just really allows that muscle to grow, so you get that nice full round look instead of just your gluteus maximus. And for it, you will have a little bit of a slightly forward lean since you're holding that weight in front of you, but just making sure that you're still driving through your heels to stand back up to work your back side. And you might be bent forward if you're holding the dumbbell low, as I am, but just making sure that you're not hunching forward and your lower back isn't arching, still keeping your core nice and braced and your torso as straight as you can while holding the weight ahead of you. If you do also have the ability to have your feet elevated, that way if you're doing it with a dumbbell or a kettlebell, that can go even lower than the height that your feet are at, and you can get even more depth in your squat. That way you can get a fuller range of motion, since this one, because you do have that wider stance, it does begin to limit your range of motion and you can't go as deep as you could with a back squat. You can do this on the same day as doing back squats, since it's not going to be as heavy of an exercise. And with back squats, you should always really do those first, since you're putting a weight ahead of you and you want to be in like your best, and your muscles nice and fresh when putting that weight there, since it can become more risky once your muscles tend to fatigue throughout the workout. For this one, you can still do after, since that weight is ahead of you, or you can just split it up on different days depending on your workout programming. This one is also just a really good one to do body weight or even with super light weights while you begin to practice the move, and then you can just slowly work your way up and progressively overload by increasing the weight. You might need some gloves or some straps to help you get the weight up, because your hands may tend to give out before your glutes do, but just increasing the weight or even using a kettlebell is a super easy way to progressively overload this move. My third favorite exercise is actually a group of exercises, because I couldn't pick just one. I couldn't figure out my favorite, and it is the deadlift. So for this, because there are different options that you can do, it's another one that you can do one version on one day, another on the other day, but the main deadlift that everybody sees is the conventional deadlift. For this one, your feet are going to be at shoulder width or even a little bit wider than shoulder width apart. You're going to be bending at your ankles, knees, and hips for the entire range of motion, up and down. That does work your entire posterior chain, but what it's mainly focusing on, what all of these deadlift variations are focusing on, is the hip hinge. So I have an entire video on that I'll have linked down below if that's something that you want to practice, and just practicing it alone, doing it body weight, is a really good way to work on this move if you don't feel comfortable using heavier weights or grabbing a barbell just yet. And it's also a really good thing to practice, because you want to make sure that you have this move down before going into loading it really heavy and risking arching your back, pulling from your lower back, and then in turn hurting your lower back, or hunching forward and then straining your upper back, or working out more of your upper body than your lower body during the move. So you do want to make sure that you're doing the move properly and that your core is nice and braced and your torso is upright. That way you can get the full benefits, especially for your glutes and for your hamstrings. And for all of these, you're going to make sure that your feet are nice and stable, but you're driving through your heels in order to get up, just as you do with all these exercises, really. But another alternative that I love, so I'll do conventional deadlifts on one day, and then on another day I love doing stiff leg deadlifts. So you actually start off this exercise in a similar stance that you do for the conventional, where you're bent at your knees, hips, and ankles in order to grab the barbell, or if you are just using some dumbbells. Once you're up and you're at the top of that first rep, instead of bending at your knees and ankles again, you're just going to be bending at your hips. You're just hip hinging, which really allows for that stretch in your hamstring and the stretch in your glutes before you stand back up. Of course, torso is the same, shoulders down, no lower back arch, no upper back hunch, and you're driving through your heels in order to raise back up. But for the straight leg deadlift, whether you're doing it with a barbell or with dumbbells, between each rep you actually do that tap on the floor in order to kind of do a quick little reset before pulling the weight back up. And another version of this is the Romanian deadlift. So the form is going to be the same, and it's also, when I say straight leg, your legs aren't completely straight. Don't lock out your knees, have a slight little bend just for safety. But for the Romanian deadlift, you're actually not going to let the weight touch all the way down to the floor. It'll like hover for a second before you pull back up, and doing that will just increase the time under tension and the resistance. So you might need to back off the weight a little bit just to make it a bit easier and so you can do it correctly. But it's also just a really good one to keep that tension and to keep that weight throughout the entire movement. Now, if you're thinking, I don't want to do any of those deadlift variations, I don't feel like touching a barbell, it's okay. There are some really good alternatives. You can just always go lighter with just a dumbbell. Just do it body weight or by having some bands underneath your feet and pulling up that way, and you won't get the same exact exercise since the resistance actually changes with the resistance band versus a weight, but it is still working those muscles and is better than not working them at all. Another really good option is to do good mornings, which you can just do body weight and is a really good way to practice the hip hinge movement. Or you can grab a light little easy bar, one of those little barbells where you're just hinging at the hips and driving up. And another variation of the deadlift that I love to do is the single leg Romanian deadlift. So a lot of people do the single leg deadlift with their leg that they're not working going up and keeping just their one leg that they're working at the time on the floor. I personally prefer and always recommend a B stance. And what that means is that the foot that's working, the leg that's working, you'll have your entire foot on the floor, and your non-working leg will just have your toes on the floor with your heels up. And doing that will just allow you to have a bit more stability instead of having your leg go up. Once you have that leg going up, then you're really focusing on balancing and just keeping your hips stable, and your hips will start to move as you try to figure out your balance. And because you're also working on trying not to fall over, you might go a little bit lighter in the weight, so then it's harder to progressively overload. So with the B stance, you can grab a heavier dumbbell, holding it on the hand of the side that you are working, the side that has the entire foot down. That way it's really working on that side as you drive through that heel. And I also just think it's great because you can progressively overload it. You don't have to worry about falling over. You have the extra stability while still getting the benefits of a single leg movement. My fourth favorite exercise is the hip thrust, and this one you can regress by just doing it on the floor with your upper back against the floor, heels both down, and then by just lifting up your hips, doing it body weight. You can add a bit more resistance by adding either a little resistance band or a hip circle, which are usually a bit thicker and more sturdier, and by pushing out, and again that pushing out and keeping your knees out instead of caving in will really start to work your glute med on the side there. You can also challenge it if you want to do body weight, but by just doing it with one foot on the floor and having the other one up, just to add a bit more of a challenge. It's also a really good workout to do if you don't have any equipment or you just want to get a workout in at home or on vacation. Then just doing those different variations without any equipment is a really good glute exercise to do. But if you do have some weights, you do have some barbells, keeping your back up against a bench instead of on the floor. These are, I find, amazing because you can really load them. You can really load the barbell versus a back squat. Once you really start to load it, if you don't have the best range of motion, the best stability, or just the best strength with it, it can become dangerous. These ones are great because you can load them and the risk of injury is pretty low. So they're a really good one if you want to ease your way into gaining strength in your glutes and in your hamstrings. For these, whether you're doing them on the floor or with your back against a bench and a barbell, you're going to be driving through your heels, trying to keep your knees in line with your second toe. And as you push up, once you're at the top, your knees are going to be rotating out as if they're going towards your toes, and your glutes, your hips are also going to be rotating up. And doing this will just make sure that the move is coming from your hamstrings and from your glutes, and to really raise that weight up there to give you that nice flat line up at the top of the position before lowering down. And that will just make sure that your glutes are pushing up, you're pushing through your heels, and it's not coming from your lower back. And of course, the same as if you are just doing it with body weight or resistance bands with your back on the floor, making sure that you are driving your knees forward and your hips forward to really get the best part of the movement. And my fifth and final favorite glute exercise are step ups. These I like to do at the end, almost like a quick little burner, because you can do them with lightweight or you can really load them and do them earlier in your workout. And these are another really good unilateral exercise where you can work your weaker side first and then follow it up with your other side. And because you are stepping up, it is also working your balance without it being a super dangerous move. You can also do them without any weight. You can do them with a resistance band, or you can really load the weight by holding heavier dumbbells. You can also challenge them by starting off with low step ups and slowly working your way up to a higher and higher platform that you can safely step up to. I personally like to keep the foot that I'm working already up, and then using that heel to push myself up to get the other foot up, then go back down, and then working one side completely and then the other instead of alternating and confusing myself. So again, working your weaker side first and then matching that same weight in reps with your stronger side, just to balance out any muscle imbalances that you may have. Again, really good for stability and just working on a nice isolation move for your glutes. I also prefer these step ups over any other single leg exercise, such as the Bulgarian split squats or lunges. For the Bulgarian split squats, they do require a lot more muscle strength and balance, and also a lot of coordination in order to do the movement properly without overcompensating with something else. So it takes a lot of work in order to get the same muscles worked as it does with these step ups. Similar with the lunges, for a lot of people that does require a lot of different stability. So while those are really good movements, my favorite and one that I always recommend when it comes to single leg and unilateral exercises for your glutes is these step ups. I just think it's one of these safer and easier options to still work those same muscles without overstraining yourself or overworking them. Those are the 5 exercises to build your glute muscles, but of course it doesn't just take working out in order to build the muscle. You do also need to eat food to do so, especially protein. So if you're not eating because you want to lose weight and try to burn fat and all of that, that's not really great overall for your health. And it's also not great if you're trying to build muscle anywhere on your body. You need to eat enough for your body to be like, oh yes, now we have the building blocks to build muscle. If you're barely eating for your body to just be like, oh, we barely have brain function, we're barely moving, we're barely doing this, and then your body won't want to put on muscle. Or if you do eat a little bit more than your super low calories, then your body will think, oh, finally we're getting food in this famine period, and it will want to hold on to it more as fat. So I'm making sure that you're eating enough and eating enough consistently in order for your body to feel like it can build muscle. So that way when you do work out, you are able to gain more strength, you are able to build muscle, and you are able to progressively overload without your body not wanting to do anything, and that all of your hard work not turning into the muscle in the body that you are trying to exercise for. So there you have it. Those are my 5 favorite exercises to grow your glutes. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, comment down below which is your favorite and what else you want to see here on my channel. And while you're there, be sure to subscribe. I upload a new video every Wednesday. So until the next one, thanks for watching.